this is going to be a quick video that shows you some things about fractions that you may not know. First of all, when you see a fraction that looks like this, or any fraction where the numerator is above the denominator, make sure we write a vocab out. There's something that you may not understand. The first thing that you may not understand is that this fraction line right here represents a form of division. So every time you write a fraction, you're actually dividing. And this 1/3 really represents 1 divided by 3. Same thing if you were to write maybe, let's say, a larger number, like 12 over 56. Well, this is 12/56 is a fraction, but again, this also equals 12 divided by 56. Now, we notice that our dividend is actually less than our divisor. When your dividend is less than your divisor, it means that your quotient or your answer will be also less than 1. Let's take a look at something else. Sometimes we have a mixed number. A mixed number means that you have a whole number that is right beside a fraction. And that's why they call it mixed, because you have one of both. Now, sometimes during a fraction problem, they're going to ask you to either rename this to what's called an improper fraction. Now, an improper fraction means that the numerator is greater than the denominator. So we're going to actually write 1 7/8 as an improper fraction. How do we do this? That means that you take the denominator, which is 8, and you multiply it by the whole number of 1. So 8 times 1. And the second thing we need to do is add the remaining parts of the whole, which is 7. So let's recap. In order to change this or rename this to an improper fraction, we multiply the denominator by the whole number and add the numerator. 8 times 1 plus 7, which is 15. And because it's a fraction, we want to make sure that the denominator stays the same. So 1 7/8 is actually the same as 15/8. 1 is a mixed number, and 1 is the same number written as an improper fraction. Well, what if you have an improper fraction and we don't necessarily know how to rename it as a mixed number? So now we're going to go the complete opposite direction. So once again, here's our improper fraction. Improper states that the numerator is greater than the denominator, and we want to rename it so that the denominator is greater than the numerator. Well, earlier I talked to you about the fact that fractions is a form of division. So when we take 23/6, we're actually going to divide 23 by 6. And some of us can use the standard algorithm way in order to figure this out. So 6 times 3 is 18. We're going to subtract. And we recognize that once we finish our division problem, we have the components we need in order to create a mixed fraction. 6, which is what our denominator was, can be divided into 23 3 whole times. That's our larger whole number. Our denominator stays the same as a 6. We can't change our parts to the whole. So the numerator, or what is remaining of the division problem, is 5. So 23 over 6 is equivalent or equal to 3 and 5/6. All right, one last thing I'd like to talk to you about: simplifying. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Simplify means in math to make it easier or find the least amount. So let's say we have a fraction 7 over 14. And we want to reduce this or find the simplest form. Now, the way we do this is we start looking at the 7 and the 14 and think, what can I divide both numbers by equally? Because remember, whatever you do to the bottom, you've got to do to the top. So I'm going to look at my multiples, or factors, of 7. 1 times 7 is 7. 2 cannot be divided into 7. 3, 4, 5, or 6 can't be divided into 7. So there's pretty much only 1 and 7. Looking at the numbers of 14, well, I can divide 14 by 1. I can multiply 2 times 7 is 14. 3 can be not divided into 14. 4 can't be divided into 14. So right away, I can see that both factors have 7 in common. So I can simplify or reduce this by dividing the numerator by 7 and the denominator by 7. And when I do that, I get an answer of 1/2. All right, let's try that again. This time, we're gonna have a fraction of 3/9. When looking at this, I think about, okay, what numbers can be divided into 3? What numbers can be divided into 9? So 1 times 3 is 3. And when I think about 9, you've got 1 times 9 is 9. 3 times 3 is 9. So they both have a 3 in common. So I'm going to divide both my numerator and my denominator by 3 to get an answer of 1/3. So 1/3 is in simplest form, because I cannot reduce 1/3 any lower. I know this because I see a 1 as the numerator. That may not always happen, but more than likely when you see a 1 there, that is as low as you can go. So before I showed you 1/2, and this is 1/3, let's try to think about a number that does not have a 1 as the numerator. So I'm going to use the same sheet of paper, just drop down a little bit. And I'm going to think about maybe 14/21. So when I think about this, I think right off the bat, I know that 7 can be divided into 14. And 7 can also be divided into 21. So when I finish dividing this, I get an answer of 2/3. 2 cannot be divided into 3 equally. So that way I know that this number or fraction is also in simplest form.